Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday, November 19th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Nunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And where we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, it's great to have you in studio today.
It is great to be here, Moshe, and hopefully it will be all smooth this morning. We know a lot of people couldn't access this podcast yesterday. It was because of an issue, an outage actually, with Cloudflare, which is an internet infrastructure company. Moshe, it feels like we learn about these companies when there's an outage.
Yeah, effectively the entire internet and all these major sites and apps, many of them rely on a handful of companies. We got Amazon Web Services, Cloudflare is another one. They each, all of them do different things, but ultimately everyone's like, wait, why is ChatGPT down? X is down. But most importantly, I can't get my Mo News podcast yesterday. Well, you can blame Cloudflare. They say that they have identified the root cause of the outage, but there's no evidence of an attack or malicious activity, which means typically somebody hit a wrong button or updated the wrong thing if they say there was no attack. But yes, we hope you have smooth sailing this morning. Listen to this podcast at a time and place of your choosing. Jill, we got notes yesterday from people being like, I don't know how to drive to work without you guys, but I'm going to try.
The strangest thing is that I was able to play the podcast. So I'm getting inundated with these notes. We're on this crazy text chain where we're like, what's going on? Nobody's getting the podcast. And I'd already listened to it. Right.
But you're actually the least important person to listen to besides me. Because you knew what was in the
podcast.
You recorded the podcast. It was all the rest of the people. Anyway, it was actually a pretty good podcast yesterday. So if you want to go back and listen to it at a time of your choosing, please go ahead and do that. Especially a few of those stories are sort of like non-daily stories. So anyway, like any podcast.
On Saturday, if you need something to listen to over the weekend.
On Saturday, you can listen to the Tuesday podcast.
But let's get to the Wednesday podcast. A bromance at the White House. President Trump welcomes the Saudi crown prince in a visit packed with deals and some tense questions from the media.
Yeah, Trump not happy with some of the critical questions. And frankly, I will say as a journalist, I don't think that the questions were very unfair, but Trump not happy with them yesterday.
The House voting overwhelmingly to force the Justice Department to release the Epstein files.
The question is, ultimately, what will actually be released?
A big court decision that could have major ramifications for the midterm elections. A federal court blocking Texas from using those new congressional maps.
Including some surprising words from a Trump-appointed judge.
To another big court decision, this one involving tech. A judge ruling against the FTC, saying that Meta did not violate antitrust laws when buying Instagram and WhatsApp.
Yeah, a big deal for Zuckerberg. He doesn't have to split up his company. Meanwhile,
Ford starting to sell used cars on Amazon.
What can't you get on Amazon?
I can't think of a thing.
Houses. I don't think you can buy houses yet.
You can, the mini ones.
Oh, yes. Okay. We'll discuss further in the podcast.
And Apple Podcast is out with the most popular shows and trends of 2025. Moshe, somehow the Mo News podcast not in the top 10. Hashtag 2026 goals.
Yes, we are moving up the ranks, but we're not quite up there with the murder mystery podcast that seem to dominate.
Plus, Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, many years ago, something happened on this day. There's your clue.
Okay, starting at the White House, where Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman got a red carpet welcome and an elaborate display of pomp and circumstance. After arriving at the White House, the Crown Prince was greeted by a military flyover of stealth fighter jets, officers on horseback, and he even got a tour of the Rose Garden from President Trump himself. It's bin Salman's first visit to the White House in more than 7 years since the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Khashoggi was a journalist, he was a legal U.S. resident, and a critic of Saudi Arabia's government. So reporters pressed President Trump and the Saudi crown prince in a tense Oval Office exchange on Tuesday. They asked questions about Khashoggi's killing, which U.S. intelligence determined during the first Trump administration was personally approved by Mohammed bin Salman. Journalists also asking about Saudi involvement in the attacks on September 11th. plus financial conflicts of interest between President Trump's family and Saudi Arabia. So take a listen to this exchange. We cut it down a little bit, but we're also trying to let it play longer than we normally would, just because it's pretty remarkable. Trump attacking the reporter for asking questions, defending the Saudi ruler, and then the Saudi ruler replying.
Your Royal Highness, the U.S. intelligence concluded that you orchestrated the brutal murder of a journalist. 9/11 families are furious that you are here in the Oval Office. Why should Americans trust you?
Who are you with?
And the same to you, Mr. President.
Now, who are you with?
I'm with ABC News, sir.
You're with who?
ABC News, sir.
Fake news. ABC fake news. One of the
But the
worst.
question is
One of the
legitimate,
worst
sir.
in the business. But I'll answer your question.
Thank you.
As far as this gentleman is concerned, he's done a phenomenal job. You're mentioning somebody that was extremely controversial. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen. But he knew nothing about it, and we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
Okay, just you ask, Mr. President,
please, go
you allow me to answer. You know, I feel painful about, the families of 9/11 in America, but, we have to focus on reality. Reality based on CIA documents and based on a lot of documents that Osama bin Laden, he used Saudi people in that event for one main purpose, is to destroy this relation, to destroy the American-Saudi relation. That's the purpose of 9/11. About the journalists, it's really painful to hear, anyone that been losing his life for, no real purpose or not in a legal way, and it's been painful for us in Saudi Arabia. We've did all the right steps of investigation, etc., in Saudi Arabia, and we've improved our system to be sure that nothing happened like that, and it's painful and it's a huge mistake, and we are doing our best that this doesn't happen again.
So, Moshe, we cut that down a bit, but both Trump's comments and bin Salman's comments have a lot of people asking a lot of questions, with Trump essentially saying, quote, things happen, at least in regard to Khashoggi's murder.
Yeah, effectively acknowledging there that sort of, well, he had it coming. And, trying to dissuade folks from thinking that the Crown Prince had anything to do with it, even though, again, the intelligence services, including the CIA, determined during Trump's first term in office that, yeah, this doesn't happen in a Saudi consulate without the express written approval of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Interestingly, Trump also yesterday going out of his way to mention MBS, great human rights record, which, again, you can compliment Saudi Arabia for some things, but human rights, not typically when they get many compliments on, including from our own State Department, an authoritarian country, major human rights issues. But the Crown Prince, who is 40 years old, he took over a number of years ago as his dad sort of is still around, technically the king, but doesn't really have the capacities to run the country. Mohammed has been trying to open things up in Saudi Arabia, but after that killing of Khashoggi back in 2018, he became an international pariah. And that was something even President Biden campaigned on. He's like, I'm going to make Saudi Arabia a pariah for what they did to this journalist, but effectively acknowledging Saudi Arabia's influence, their power, their money, and oil, a whole variety of things that have linked us to Saudi Arabia going back decades. There was the infamous fist bump that Biden gave MBS during a visit. It wasn't a handshake, it was a fist bump.
Which I think is in some ways almost more endearing than a handshake.
Some people thought that, right? Some people thought that, but it does reinforce the fact that even Biden, who campaigned on it, sort of acknowledged within a year or two that this isn't going to work. We need to be practical, especially in a place like the Middle East. And that's something, Trump runs his foreign policy on. He runs it on economic issues. He runs it on trade. He runs it on investment. And bin Salman yesterday made a very public showing of saying that Saudi Arabia, which has previously promised $600 billion with a B investment in the U.S. economy, he's taken that up to $1 trillion. At least that's the promise from the Saudis. Now, we should note the Saudis did make a whole bunch of promises in the first term, $450 billion in investment. That turned out to just be under about $100 billion or so about a fifth of what they promised. So there are some skeptics who are like, how can they invest $1 trillion in the U.S. economy if their entire annual GDP, their entire economy is $1 trillion? So he didn't give specifics. He didn't give a time horizon. But nonetheless, the way Trump operates is he's running foreign policy as an investment vehicle. He's all about business. And that's been the focus. You saw with the first trip Trump took to the Middle East this year. He didn't go to Canada. He didn't go to Europe. He went to the Gulf, to Qatar, to UAE, and has been visiting with the Saudis. And so this has been a huge thing for him. And so he sees where the money is, he sees where the investment opportunity is. And that has really been the central focus, the North Star, you could say, of the Trump foreign policy.
And as we talked about business, there's also Trump's family business under some scrutiny for all of the various deals that it's doing in Saudi Arabia. So there are some ethical questions as well. That was one of the other questions that President Trump did not like. So he was asked whether it is appropriate for his family to pursue business in Saudi Arabia while he is president. Trump said that he has nothing to do with the family business. He says the Trump Organization operates all over the world and has actually done very little with Saudi Arabia. However, since Trump's election, one of his business partners with close ties to the Saudi government has announced at least 4 Trump-branded developments in Saudi Arabia, with some negotiations underway for another project overseen by Mohammed bin Salman himself.
Yeah, this is something we've never really seen before in terms of politics and profit making. And even if there are no laws against this, it is very much in the eyes of those who study ethics and corruption, shared norms. Typically, even the appearance of a conflict of interest, the appearance that you could be profiting off the presidency personally, has been something that's come under a lot of scrutiny. And so you've seen a number of deals here, multi-billion-dollar projects, Trump-branded projects, including the development of a Trump Plaza development in Jeddah. They say they're going to be building a Central Park-inspired green spine in the area. Live Golf, which is the professional league backed by the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, has hosted tournaments at the Trump Golf Club near Miami. And then you have Saudi Arabia's Sovereign Wealth Fund, which has contributed $2 billion to an investment fund run by Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, the husband of Ivanka. So a lot of questions there when it comes to the tie-ups that they have with the Saudis and several other countries and whether there's a conflict of interest. But that's something that the White House repeatedly said. First of all, they even criticized the question being asked. But beyond that, they say that there's no impropriety here and there are no laws being broken. By the way, I should mention the clip we played earlier, and then we're about to play one more clip. The questioner, the journalist who's asking those questions is Mary Bruce from ABC News, who took a pummeling from the president, as you heard yesterday, for asking, legitimate questions about 9/11, about Khashoggi, about Trump and ethics, and about Epstein here, which we'll play in a second. Now, there is a lot of business happening here between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, expected to sign economic and defense agreements, as we told you about yesterday. The U.S. also signing off on the sale of F-35 stealth fighter jets to the kingdom, which is a pretty controversial move because historically speaking, the U.S. has typically allowed the Israelis to be the primary recipient of the most cutting-edge technology in the region. So certainly some nervousness on the Israeli side that countries like Qatar, and in this case Saudi Arabia, are receiving some of the latest and greatest technology. Now, we should mention it's still going to be years out. They got to build the F-35s. They got to train Saudi pilots on the F-35s. But it does come as there's a larger discussion here of a new Middle East. And we did hear a bit of that yesterday from the Saudi leader talking about the Abraham Accords. This is the agreement that was signed between Israel and several Arab and Muslim countries during the first term, opening up relations between those countries and Israel. And sort of the crown jewel of this is viewed as Saudi Arabia, one of the largest countries in the region, most influential and richest countries in the region, the home of Islam, and the idea that the home of Islam would have an open relationship with the Jewish state, a pretty big deal here, and something that MBS addressed in the Oval Office yesterday. Take a listen to what bin Salman had to say.
But I think you have a very good feeling toward the Abraham Accords.
Yes, definitely, Mr. President. We want peace for the Israelis. We want peace for the Palestinians. We want them to coexist peacefully in the region. And we will do our best to reach that day.
So this was a discussion that was happening in Trump's first term. This was a discussion that was happening during the Biden administration. But then the Hamas attacks on October 7th basically killed this. That was actually one of the goals of Hamas, is they saw Israel and Saudi Arabia getting ever so close, and they wanted to sort of blow that up, among other things. So you do see a scenario here where Saudi Arabia will recognize Israel, open up relations, but they do want to see a pathway to a Palestinian state. That's been a discussion here. What that looks like, given that the Israeli Prime Minister is not that keen on it, will be a big open question here. But as we told you in yesterday's pod, the one thing all these countries have in common, they all are concerned about Iran. And so ultimate alliance here, which has sort of been already happening behind the scenes between the Israelis, the Saudis, the Americans, and several other countries, a primary focus. And then I mentioned the Epstein story, another question Mary Bruce of ABC News asked about yesterday. And the questions about Epstein have really been triggering Trump of late. You may have heard or seen the clip we put up on Instagram yesterday of Trump insulting a reporter on Air Force One, saying at one point, as the Bloomberg reporter tried to follow up on Epstein on Friday, quiet piggy, he called her. And then yesterday, Mary Bruce asking about Epstein as the House was about to vote on it, which we'll talk about in a second, and curious as to why Trump doesn't just release the documents, why he's waiting on Congress to release the documents. Well, Trump let her have it and then had this to say.
Mr. President, why wait for Congress to release the Epstein files? Why not just do it now?
You know, it's not the question that I mind, it's your attitude. I think you are a terrible reporter. It's the way you ask these questions. You start off with a man who's highly respected, asking him a horrible, insubordinate, and just a terrible question. And you could even ask that same exact question nicely. You're all psyched up. Somebody psychs you over at ABC. You're going to psych it. You're a terrible person and a terrible reporter. As far as the Epstein files is, I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of my club many years ago because I thought he was a sick pervert. And I guess I turned out to be right. But you know who does have? Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, who ran Harvard, was with him every single night, every single weekend. They lived together. They went to his island many times. I never did.
So he continues to bring up Democrats here without really answering the underlying question about why just release the stuff and don't depend on Congress here. But what was notable yesterday was the term you just heard him use, referring to Epstein as a sick pervert. He hasn't said that before. He has said that he had a falling out with Epstein. He said it was over the fact that Epstein was hiring away women who worked at the Trump spa to work with Epstein. And that's essentially what he has said has been the issue here. So the fact that he brought up that I thought he was a sick pervert, interesting, because Trump is also in the same breath said, I knew nothing about him. And so certainly that remark from President Trump yesterday piqued some interest as we're talking about all things Epstein files and the big vote yesterday.
Right, so now to that Epstein vote on Capitol Hill, the House overwhelmingly voted on Tuesday to compel the Justice Department to release all files related to the convicted sex offender, a rare bipartisan move that followed a last-minute shift by Speaker Mike Johnson and President Trump. So their late support marked this dramatic reversal after months of resistance from GOP leadership. The vote was 427 to 1. If you were wondering who is that one person who voted against this, it is Louisiana Republican Congressman Clay Higgins. He cast the lone no vote. He said he opposed the bill because it would, quote, reveal and injure thousands of innocent people, warning that a broad release of the investigative files to a, quote, rabid media will absolutely result in innocent people being hurt. Several of Epstein's victims who were watching from the gallery applauded the outcome. But most just because the bill passed the House does not mean that all of the Epstein files will eventually be released.
Right. Trump has said he will sign the bill once it gets to his desk. However, late last week, he also called on the Attorney General to investigate a whole bunch of high-profile figures, specifically Democrats, and their ties to Epstein. Well, what does that mean? Well, when you have an open investigation, you can't necessarily release a lot of documents if they pertain to those investigations. So we will see what actually can be released here amid ongoing investigations, and then of what is released, what will be redacted. Now, the House bill here does say redact anything that has to do with victims, but we know the government has a tendency to redact as much as humanly possible when it comes to sensitive documents. And keep in mind, what's interesting is what Clay Higgins said, that Clay Higgins in Louisiana, the one congressman who voted against this, but his concern is one that you will hear from others who even voted for it, which is that there are a lot of accusations in these documents and not necessarily firm evidence. And so even if you were mentioned in an Epstein email, you may become persona non grata, or you were in his phone book, even if you did nothing wrong ultimately. And that's been one of the concerns going back to the summer as to why they didn't release files just hook, line, and sinker, is that, well, especially the feds, they tend to release stuff when there's firm things, or there are charges, or, sort of legal case paying out. But ultimately, we know Epstein's reputation for just kind of throwing around, saying I'm influential, even in some cases where he was not. And so it'll be interesting, again, to see sort of what standard they use. especially as we already saw 20,000 plus documents come out last week. Interestingly, Jill, we've already seen somebody probably face the biggest ramifications for what came out last week, and it was not Donald Trump. It was Larry Summers. Some of you might be familiar with Larry Summers, former Clinton Treasury Secretary, former Obama economic advisor. At one point, he was discussed as a future Federal Reserve chairman. He ran Harvard University for 5 years or so. It turns out, based on the emails that came out last week, that Larry Summers was emailing very frequently with Jeffrey Epstein in 2018 and 2019. Now, that is more than 10 years after we already know Epstein admitted to sex crimes in Florida. And he emailed him up until the day before Epstein was arrested again by the feds in 2019. What was he emailing him about? Well, they were going back and forth because Larry Summers, in his mid-60s, had taken a liking to a younger woman he was mentoring, 30 years younger than him. And he was emailing Jeffrey Epstein for advice on how to effectively get this woman to sleep with him, a woman he was mentoring. By the way, keep in mind, Larry Summers married at the time, still married today. And at one point in the emails, Epstein is saying, oh, you have her sort of desperate for you right now. That's a good sign, Larry. But Larry Summers, former Clinton Treasury Secretary, former president of Harvard, I should note, also somebody who is teaching several undergrad classes at Harvard this semester, is like talking like a schoolboy, being like, what advice do you have here? What advice do you have here? Wow, she dressed really hot today. This is the email correspondence that came out here. And so Summers sits on a number of influential boards, several of them already in the past 2 days, being like, yeah, Larry Summers has nothing to do with us anymore. Summers did say he's taking a step back from his public profile because he's got to deal with some issues at home, clearly. But he does say he intends to continue teaching his courses at Harvard this semester. We will see how that plays out, because among the people who is saying, Harvard, please cut ties, Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts, former Harvard professor herself, being like, this is ridiculous. He cannot be trusted with young women, given what has been uncovered here.
Ew, is all I could say.
Epstein at one point says, I'm your wingman, Larry Summers.
All right, time now for the speed read, starting with politics and a story that will have major ramifications on the midterm elections. From the Texas Tribune, Texas cannot use its new congressional map for the 2026 election and will instead need to stick with the lines passed in 2021. That is according to a 3-judge panel. They ruled on Tuesday. This decision is a major blow for Republicans, both in Texas and nationally, who had pushed through this unusual mid-decade redistricting at the behest of President Trump. So they were hoping the new map would give Republicans another 5 congressional seats in the state. So that would be control of 30 seats, up from the 25 that they currently hold, as a way to help Republicans keep their narrow majority in the U.S. House. U.S. Judge Jeffrey Brown, who is a Trump appointee, wrote, quote, the public perception of this case is that it is about politics. To be sure, politics played a role in drawing the 2025 map, but it was much more than just politics. Substantial evidence shows that Texas racially gerrymandered the 2025 map.
Yeah, very interesting coming from a Trump-appointed judge here. So you had a Trump judge, an Obama judge rule against this map, a Reagan judge say there was nothing wrong with this map. But that was the argument you heard from Democrats in the state, saying you're cutting apart Black and Latino districts, and it's discriminatory. Now, this case, like most cases, can be appealed, but can be appealed directly to the U.S. Supreme Court. And that's what Texas is doing here. The problem Texas faces is they only have a couple weeks to make this map a thing, because December 8th is the filing deadline to run for various districts in Texas. And if this is not the map, which this court says it's not, then you can't file to run in those districts or in the way things are working. So really, Texas is under the gun here in the Supreme Court. We'll see how quickly they rule on this. But this appears to be a pretty disastrous ruling for the Republicans in Texas. And what's super interesting about all of this is that this set off the chain of gerrymandering we've seen across the country, including in California. Because once Trump told Texas, give me new Republican districts, of which they gave him 5. North Carolina added a Republican district themselves. Missouri added a Republican district. And California said, well, if you're going to do that on Team Red, we're going to do that for Team Blue. And they had that vote earlier this month. And California is in the process, and it does not appear they're stopping, regardless of the Texas ruling, to add 5 new Democratic seats. So it'll be very interesting to see the fallout of this and whether this sort of boomerangs on Republicans, that what they thought would give them a key advantage or help them in a midterm year that could be rough for Republicans might end up benefiting Democrats more than anybody else.
Okay, a major tech and business story from the New York Times. A win for Meta. A federal judge ruling on Tuesday that Meta did not break the law when it bought its nascent rivals Instagram and WhatsApp, handing a major win to the $1.5 trillion company and also dealing a blow to the government's efforts to rein in the power of tech giants. The judge said in an 89-page ruling that Meta did not create a monopoly in social networking through the acquisitions, and that the market has continued to expand with rivals, including TikTok and YouTube. The FTC had sued the company, accusing it of breaking antitrust law by acquiring Instagram and WhatsApp in a, quote, buy or bury strategy to cement its social networking dominance. The FTC, by the way, had to approve those purchases many years ago. The decision, a reprieve for Meta. The FTC had preemptively asked the judge to force Meta to divest itself of Instagram and WhatsApp. So this now clears the way for Meta to continue to pursue its business ambitions, mostly now into the expansion into artificial intelligence.
Yeah, this is super interesting here because one of the few issues that the Biden administration and now the Trump administration agreed on was that some of these big tech companies had just gotten too big. And so you saw a number of these cases, including a case that began during Trump 1, went through Biden, is now continuing through Trump. It's a case against Google and its monopoly on both search and then its deals with Apple and Safari and the various browsers out there like Chrome. There's still a negotiation happening with a judge before that about splitting off certain parts of Google there. There's also a lawsuit against Amazon, which the government accuses Amazon of squeezing small merchants on the platform. That's scheduled for trial in 2027. So there's a lot of ongoing regulatory cases here. So a win here for Meta, but still you have numerous cases the Trump Justice Department is pursuing against various tech giants.
From Fox News, Ford is now selling its used vehicles on Amazon. The company's pre-owned cars and trucks will be available through Amazon's auto sales site. It's currently available in Los Angeles, Seattle, and Dallas, and it will be made available to additional markets at a later time.
So this is the latest iteration of Amazon Autos, which launched last year. It was focused initially on new car sales, specifically Hyundai. So the addition of Ford here opens up a market for pre-owned vehicles on Amazon. Apparently, they're going to have different tiers here, gold, blue, and EV certified, depending on how many miles it has and various other conditions here. The collaboration allows customers to browse a local dealership's inventory directly through Amazon's site. So just the latest feature here over on Amazon.
Moshe, we kind of jokingly asked at the beginning of the podcast, what can't you buy on Amazon?
I asked ChatGPT. And they're like guns, ammunition, explosives, fireworks, illegal drugs, they think, human organs, dogs, cats, farm animals, most live animals, THC and prescription medications.
For now.
Real estate, bonds, hazardous chemicals, NFTs. Anyway, we go on. So yes, Amazon has a lot, but there's also a lot there, some legal, some illegal, still not on Amazon.
But you know they're trying to make headway into some
live
of
reptiles.
Where did you get that mini crocodile? Amazon. It came in 24 hours.
That's the one thing the real Amazon, the rainforest, still has on Amazon.com.
And finally, from Apple Podcasts, Apple coming out with a list of its most popular podcasts of 2025. The Joe Rogan Experience has officially climbed past The Daily, taking the #1 spot. Rogan Show has been running for over 15 years. It features hours-long interviews between Rogan, who is a stand-up comedian. That's how he got his start. And a wide range of notable people. Guests in the past year have included Elon Musk twice, FBI Director Kash Patel, and Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, one of the most influential interviews of the election cycle was Trump going on Joe Rogan, if you guys recall that. Interesting, as we go through the top shows here, you got Crime Junkie along with Dateline NBC. Call Her Daddy is at #7, Huberman Lab at 9, Ezra Klein Show at 10. So a mix here of news, politics, a bit of comedy and talk. Also, interestingly, here in the U.S., 2 of the top 10 most shared shows are shows about the Bible in a Year, and the Bible Recap. And among the most followed shows, in addition to Joe Rogan, is the Mel Robbins podcast, along with Amy Poehler, and then the Charlie Kirk Show at #4. So we're working on it. We're working into getting into top 10. And that's a big goal for 2026, Joe.
We are clawing our way inch by inch,
Review by
day
review
by day.
on Apple Podcasts. If you haven't reviewed us already, help us get there.
Those reviews matter, as we say every day.
As Jill says on the podcast, every single day at the end of the podcast. Now for On This Day in History. On this day in 1863, November 19th, 1863, at the dedication of a military cemetery at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, President Abraham Lincoln delivers one of the most memorable speeches in American history in fewer than 275 words. Of course, it would begin 77 years ago. Our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty. And he would also, this was a trying time for the country amidst the Civil War, but he said that the dead here will not die in vain. This nation under God will have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. Powerful words then that still continue to stand more than a century and a half later.
Next time, I'm going to need a little more feeling with that motion.
And yeah, I know. I'll put more power into it. Motion's just like reading it, emotionless.
I'm waiting for some oomph, but I get it. It's the end of the show.
It's the end of the show. I'm trying to get people home right now. From Abraham Lincoln to Applebee's on this day in 1980, the first Applebee's, then named TJ Applebee's, opens in Decatur, Georgia. And on this day, this is sort of an Amazon-themed podcast. On this day in 2007, Amazon.com begins to sell the Kindle, the wireless electronic reading device that has played a big role in popularizing ebooks. And we'll end here with a bit of pop culture. On this day in 1975, One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest premieres in theaters. The Jack Nicholson film, officially 50 years old today. And on this day in 1992, Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg released Nothing But a G Thing.
Nothing but a G thing, baby. All right. Thank you guys for listening to the
Was that your rendition of Nothing But a J Thing?
It wasn't not my rendition.
It felt more Taylor Swift than Snoop Dogg. Baby.
That's all I have to give here, Moshe. Thank you for listening to the Mo News Podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And review us in the App Store. The reviews matter. Help us.
Don't review Jill's rap. It's like this and like that and like this. And like that. And like this. Or my rapping.
I think yours is worse.
Well, I'm peeping.
Ain't nothing but a G thing.
And I'm creeping. Jill, come back to the studio tomorrow. It's much more fun in person.
Maybe I will. All right, guys. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow.